Hello folks, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher again, and this is another episode of my What Is It Mystery Tool series, this being number 69B, the answer portion. Go back and watch 69A if you have missed it. And look down in the comments or description section and I'll put a link in there for the playlist. So there is almost 140 of these in all, including the questions and the answers. So I've got some interesting things here. I think I got all of the correct answers. Remember, sometimes I don't know either. Thank you for the comments. There were a lot of good guesses and accurate guesses as well. So let's get started and see what these items actually are. Okay, we'll go by numbers here. This being 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Starting out here with number 1. All 5 of these items came from a recent auction, and when I saw this on the hay rack, I said to David, his dad owned this and his dad was a plumber. It is a punch, and it's 1 7/16 in diameter. Almost everybody had this right, but I didn't really know what it was. I had to ask David, as I just said. But made by Greenlee. We all know that big company up in Rockford. But this is a punch to punch through sheet metal studs. That is, metal studs that are used as partitions, usually in commercial buildings rather than residences, and the large hole would be used by both plumbers and electricians in order to provide a pathway for their conduit or their wire or their pipes or whatever they're passing through the walls. So it punches a nice clean hole, 1 7/16 as I just said. I'll do a sample here. Admittedly, this is aluminum, soft as can be, but sure makes a nice hole. And we got the extra throat here because there's a certain width or thickness to a stud. The studs, of course, are made out of galvanized steel, but it's nevertheless it's sheet metal. And here's a picture of it that I took off of the internet, and it's kind of an expensive tool at $252. There must be a lot of gearheads watching my show because almost everybody had this right, although a few people called it a fencing pliers or things like that. But in fact, it is clearly marked here a weight remover. So this is used to balance tires, or I should say, not to balance them, but to remove the weights. I've seen them used a million times. You probably have too. There's another little pry bar to help you. And then you can trim the weights just a little bit here because they're made out of a hard lead and they're kind of brittle, so if they were a little bit too long you could trim a little bit off the end. And of course the hammer is used to hammer it back onto the steel rim. These aren't used with aluminum rims or with some of the weights they're using on modern cars, but I think to some extent they're still being used. And in a recent video, remember I had this, and many people said that wrongly that this is a tire tool. It's not. It's a multi-purpose stocking stuffer given to a pouting husband on Christmas morning. A multi-tool, a mustache trimmer. Do not compare it with a quality tool, but there is a resemblance, isn't there? Well, the jury is still out on this one, and we really haven't decided, or I haven't decided, whether it is a tool to tighten tire chains when you put them on the winter tires, or is it, I've been told by a man at the auction that it was used to remove brake springs from drum brakes on a car or a truck. It's about 14 inches long. It's been repaired here. That is, somebody used baling wire there. I suppose there was a link more like that, but obviously it's a tool used to pry. And notice that on the pliers here, very, very hard to read, and I spent an awful lot of time trying to find out what this was on the internet, but I never could find a patent or really any information. But it says Kern patented, and it says the same thing on the other side. Now I want you to notice here that on this pair of pliers there is a little bit of a groove. Now what makes me tend to think that it is for brakes rather than chains is as follows. So this is not a brake spring, this is some kind of John Deere spring, but it's about the same wire diameter, and that fits just perfectly in that little groove. See what I mean? Now there are other tools used to remove brake springs, specifically made and marked for that. Matter of fact, I should have brought some of them in from the garage. I got a bunch of them. But getting back to this is a chain. It's not really tire chains, but it's about the size. And you can readily see that it doesn't really allow itself to fit in that little groove. So to me that's kind of the proof, but it's not the final proof. But the distance here, boy, this is awkward, very awkward. The distance right here also tends to make me think that it's for brakes. Now let me show you a picture in the 1960 Chilton's manual, the year I was a junior in high school, and boy does this thing stink. So what I am deducing here is that you use the little plier to catch onto the brake spring, and then the prying portion, this point here, would be put someplace over here, probably on the brake itself, and pry it off. But there are so many wonderful tools that will do this that seem far less bulky or crazy than this. However, that particular tool has a lot of leverage because it's so long. If anybody really knows about this Kern, be sure and put it in the comments. When I was a teenager with my 51 Buick and I had to repair the brakes, I didn't even know they made manuals or specialized tools for these jobs in the automotive. So we used whatever. My dad didn't even have a vice grips. I had to borrow one from somebody else. I used a vice grips and a big screwdriver, and I remember that slipping off, and I'm working out in the snow and the gravel driveway, and this came off, and there was so much pressure it came up and hit my lip. Luckily it was so cold out I couldn't feel the pain, but there was blood everywhere. So now I'm glad to know that there are specialized tools. Sorry for getting off topic. And number 4, almost everybody had this right. This of course is a compass for cutting circles and arcs in glass. You've all seen the tips on glass cutters. This would be a bugger. I can't imagine it working very well because really when you're cutting glass, you're not. You're scoring it and then you're breaking it, and it's hard enough to cut it straight, let alone cut a curve. You know it's going to come off in pieces, but I suppose a skilled glazer would be able to use this. It's kind of a nice tool because it has the graduations right on the beam, and this loosens. Oh, what I don't get about this, it does loosen, but did you just notice that it's a left-hand thread? So why is it left-hand? I suppose, see, that's confusing. I'm confused right now. If I can get that back on. But I don't know if it's so you can go in one direction and it won't unscrew, but that could also be said of a right-hand thread. So I don't know. Why is that a left-hand thread? Number 5. When I saw this, the first thing I thought, this is used to remove faucet seats. Remember, the man that owned this was a plumber. But I don't know how many people said, oh no, that's used on Volkswagens, the older vans, the microbus, to open up the engine compartment or the tire department or something, compartment or something like that. And So I'm going to assume that's what it's for. Matter of fact, this is already sold to a man in another state who collects Volkswagens. And he, I would consider to be the authority, but some others said that it was also used on many type of access panels for electricity or utilities, or even on the side of EMD locomotives to open up those side doors, you know, that cover up the engine. But we're going to pass this off as a Volkswagen church key to open up the panels. As a side note, there was even somebody that suggested this is for stirring paints, because the end here looks like the tapered square end on an auger bit, but this would be incredibly slow. So we know that's not what it's for, but it makes a good conversation piece. The venerable Ace wooden panel would be 10 times better for stirring your paint than this thing. Well, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and click the notification bell. I'll see you next time. By the way, do you like this series, or am I really beating it to death and should it come to an end? I got about a dozen or two items yet that I could put on, but waiting for your input, because it seems like the viewership is waning on this, so there's a lack of interest. Tubalcain saying so long for now.